Warren Macdonald with the Solution Revolution, back with you again, this time with Dustin Bajer from Jasper Park High?
Jasper Place.
Jasper Place High, yeah. Almost, got it. Now the reason that I wanted you to meet Dustin is that Dustin has an amazing thing going on here that he's going to tell you a little bit about in a permaculture setup here at the school, and it fits in perfectly with what we're talking about with the Solution Revolution on solution-focused change. So yeah, maybe you could tell us a little bit about what you've got going on.
Sure. So for a couple years here at Jasper Place High School, we've been working on setting up a permaculture program, and it originally started off as a student club. And with about 30 students and myself, we converted a central school courtyard into a food-producing forest system. And the reason we wanted to do a forest garden as opposed to a conventional garden is that a forest has all of these relationships and connections going on within it. And because of these connections and relationships, it's really stable. So, you know, it doesn't need watering.
Yeah.
It doesn't need fertilizing. You don't need to go around and squish and kill all the bugs. It's not dependent on chemicals. And you know, theoretically, just like a regular forest, if you walk away from it for, you know, a decade or 2 decades or 10 decades, it should still be there.
Yeah.
Because it builds soil over time. It builds biodiversity over time, and in this case, it also produces food.
So self-sustaining.
So self-sustaining.
And so you don't really need to get involved with the maintenance of it, although you can, because you built it. But
yeah, there's a little bit of maintenance and stuff that we do. We mostly just ensure that we are replacing anything that we pull out of there. So if we take, you know, if we're harvesting food out of it, you know, if you do that intensively, you know, over many years, you can, you know, deplete the soil, deplete the nutrients of the system. This, like a natural ecosystem, I mean, it drops a lot of leaves and sequesters carbon and builds soil over time. But we'll also add leaves, we'll also add some mulch and some compost, and we make all of our compost with the culinary scraps. So that's an easy thing to do.
Which is the other part of the equation that we saw with the kitchen, how you've got the kitchen involved on the input and output side.
Yeah.
And then we'll cut some of this in with the aquaculture with the tilapia.
So this system up here is essentially a hydroponic system, and the problem with that is you need to continuously be adding chemical nutrients to it in order to keep the plants healthy. The system at the bottom is aquaculture, and the problem with that is you end up with all of this fish waste, which is essentially sewage. You can flush it out and replace the water, but now you're sending that sewage downstream and it's somebody else's problem. But if you stick the two systems together, the fish provide the nutrients for the hydroponic system, and the hydroponic system becomes the filter for the fish, and the whole thing is self-contained. And on top of that, the product that you get out of this, or the yield that you get out of this, is, you know, food as fish and food as plants. That goes to the culinary program. Culinary scraps come back to this, get put in as, you know, food for the fish, and the whole thing just works on cycles. I guess that's sort of permaculture design in it, for me, is all about the connections and the relationships.
Yeah.
So you can take a look at any sort of element of a design, be it in a garden or in a house or city planning, but it requires certain inputs, it has certain yields, and whenever you have, you know, an input that isn't being met, that means its work is involved and you have to go and do that work. And if you have a yield that isn't being used, you have waste or you have a problem. But often, like these two systems, you know, if the waste product of one becomes the input of the other, you know, there's no more problems. The problem becomes a solution, and, you know, it becomes hands-free. You know, so I guess a way of looking at it is the strengths of these two systems come together in such a way that their weaknesses don't matter. And for me, I think if you can pull that analogy out of ecology into community, and you can talk about people coming together so that their strengths align, so that their weaknesses don't matter, then, you know, I mean, that's kind of what it's about. And I think we can do that at school, at like a school level. I'm really interested in taking an ecosystem model approach to education.
And things have a habit of, I mean, they've got to start somewhere, but then they can expand out. So you can start it in a school.
Totally. Yep.
Get it working there, and then it filters out into the community, which is, as you touched on earlier, about the project out of the airport.
And there's 2,400 students at this school. So, I mean, if you think about 2,400 students and their, you know, immediate families and their friends and their extended families, like, you can do something in a school that, you know, reaches 10,000 people pretty easily. So it's, I think, a perfect place to be doing little things like this. Plus, it, you know, it fits in with the curriculum. The kids think it's, you know, the kids are exposed to something kind of new and interesting. And if you can't be innovative, you can't do something innovative at a school, then, I mean,
where can you?
Where can you, right? I mean, schools should be the most forward-thinking institutions that we have, because we're preparing them for a future that we can't even imagine. We don't know what the world's going to be like in 10 years. So, you know, let's not be afraid to play around and try some new things and experiment.
One of the interesting things that I wanted to check on, actually I've got a couple of questions, but probably let's start with this. One of the things that I found really interesting and what I like about permaculture is how it's all interconnected, but how you've brought not only the different, the kitchen has got involved, and then you've got the, with the aquaculture system, how that's set up in the kitchen, in the training area, but this thing about everything being interconnected.
Yeah, I think it's, you know, we feel that we're independent, and you know, maybe that's a nice thought. Maybe people don't like to think that, you know, the actions of others affect them, but really everything is interconnected, and it's not a bad thing, because if you realize that and you understand that, then you can actually go out there and you can see how, you know, how everything kind of fits together, and sort of taking this ecological model of a forest. You know, everything within a forest, you know, it performs multiple functions. Even a rock, like a rock, it's a lump, it sits there. Well, you know, things live on rocks, things live under rocks, things grow on rocks. Weather erodes it over time, provides nutrients to the soil. It heats up during the day, and if you're a little plant growing beside that rock, you have a nice little microclimate. So, I mean, something that just sits there provides all of these ecological functions and benefits the things around it. And, you know, if you talk about a person or a school and all of the connections that are there, if we can foster those connections and honor them, then we can create some really interesting scenarios where, you know, everybody within it, within that system kind of benefits.
Yeah, and especially in terms of education with the school, the kids are learning about how these things are connected.
Yeah, absolutely. So the program itself, you know, so many programs are started in schools, and they're great programs, but they're maybe in isolation. So, you know, with this program, there's been a conscious effort to try and get as many different students on board, as many different teachers on board, departments on board, go out and find into the community and try and bring them on board and bring what we're doing out into the community. Because just like, you know, those connections in an ecosystem, I mean, if 1, 2, 3 of those connections get cut, well, the program's still going to be okay. But that's just a natural, you know, result of recognizing that nothing exists in isolation. Not a garden, you know, certainly not an individual, certainly not a school.
Yeah, and then there's an interesting kind of side thing that's developed from this about how you've attracted interest from the community into taking the same principles that you've applied here out into bigger projects.
Yeah, there's been a lot of chances to take what we've been doing here and to share it. The Devonian Botanic Garden, I've been teaching some classes there. That's the University of Alberta's garden, just outside of the city by Devon. The architects behind the city center airport redevelopment plan in the city, they're going to be doing like a sort of a green city within the city, and they want to turn these neighborhoods, they want to have these neighborhoods with these agricultural strips through them, and so we have the chance to help kind of start that pilot project. Just definitely lots of other teachers from all over the province who've contacted me, and they're like, "Hey, we like what you're doing at Jasper Place. Could you help us set up similar projects at our school?" So it has definitely been growing.
So the interesting question for me is, a lot of people feel like, I think you'd have to be quite in denial, so quite ignorant to not see a lot of the problems that we have in the world, and people tend to be overwhelmed by those and have a sense of, well, what can I do? I can't do anything because the problems are so immense. The thing that I found interesting when I discovered what you were doing here was, wow, that's happening in Edmonton. I mean, Edmonton's like, I'm rarely lucky enough to be here in the summer, so I'm usually here in the winter. Holy smoke, permaculture here, and we've gone, and it's an oil city as well.
It is, yeah.
Right, and the oil sands are just up there. So when I discovered what you were doing, my first question was, kind of why and how.
Yeah.
And I think I know the why. It's because you wanted to be part of the solution without. Well, actually, no,
yeah, and you know, for me, I've always just been. I've had a deep interest in ecology and kind of gardening. Actually, as a kid, I hated it. Let me backtrack a little bit. As a kid, I hated it because I grew up on an acreage, and my parents would sort of force me to go and weed, and maybe that's why I'm taking on this permaculture approach.
Because you don't have to weed.
I don't have to weed as much, yeah. And so, but I've always had a huge interest and just I really firmly believe that as a species, we're not inherently evil. You know, there's this misconception that if people touch it, we're going to wreck it, and I don't think that that's the case at all. And I think that if you take a look at certainly a lot of indigenous cultures around the world, there's lots of examples of people sort of honoring those patterns and principles that occur in ecology, and as a result, they benefit from it. Ecology benefits from it. I mean, out here we're trying to grow food and benefit ecology. Soil gets better, more biodiversity every year, and more food every year. I mean, it's win-win. Yeah. And the fact that there was lawn and a couple crabapple trees a couple years ago, and now there's 80 plus species of edible perennial plants in there. We got birds in there. We have little squirrels running around. So it's a completely different place. And I certainly don't think we've done any harm to it.
And really, the thing is, it didn't cost a huge amount of money to get that done.
No, a lot. I mean, we priced out purchasing soil. Okay, if we purchase soil, it's going to cost $2,000 to bring in some topsoil there. Well, okay, $2,000. There's the added issue that if you're pulling in $2,000 worth of topsoil, someone else is losing $2,000 worth of topsoil. So we got agricultural waste. We got teachers to bring in their yard waste. We got some compost from the city. We fished cardboard out of the recycling bin, and we made all of that soil out there, for a fraction of the cost.
So you made it with the resources
that we have here, and it's a school. I mean, if you take a look at all of the resources that you have here, and I mean, there's a construction class. There's a welding shop, there's art, there's, how can they get involved here? We have all of these raised beds out there. Well, we could, purchase a bunch of raised beds, but we have a construction class here. Why don't we get them involved? And now they're part of this project, just as much as we are. They're kind of contributing to it, and the Permaculture Project is contributing to their work. And we have these, these two programs that have now married, and that's another connection.
So the Permaculture program, in a sense, acts as a hub.
Yeah, hopefully,
yeah.
So we have, as an example, in biology, Biology 20 in particular, there's this, this ecology study. Well, now we have a place within the school that, by the way, is also growing food, but is a perfect place for, to take a look at some patterns and principles in ecology. So they come out, our aquaponics system, the chemistry classes are very much interested in that. So, I mean, there's just another opportunity for another connection. And if we can just slowly keep building these, then, it should benefit everybody. I was going to say that I think what I've really enjoyed about this program or this project is that, I'm hoping that it's as you mentioned, there's a lot of challenges that as a society that we're up against, and it's really easy to get bogged down by that and to say we need to change this, we need to change this. But at the same time, we need some positive examples out there, and I hope that this could be one of them.
Yeah, well, I think it is, and that's really what this is all about. This project of mine is focusing on the people that are finding the solutions, like, as I mentioned, my neighbour with the biodiesel plant, because there are all these examples out there that people may not know about. Mm-hmm. I mean, the great thing about what you've got going here is I've seen that you're getting media, and that people are starting to kind of see it, which is interesting, and then it flows out. But it doesn't flow out if we don't get to see it.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
So the more that we get talking about it, and I mean, you have what, 2,300 students here?
Yeah, I don't know what the number changes depending on who I talk to, but I think 2,400. There's a lot.
and they become ambassadors because they go home and talk about.
That's right. So each one of those students goes home. They have brothers, they have sisters, they have parents, they have cousins and family members and friends beyond this school. So with something this big, it's not hard to see how a project here could expand beyond it. You know, if some of these kids, kids will come back at in September and they'll say, "Hey, Mr. Bajer, I grew a garden this last year," and they're excited about it. And I mean, even just even it's not a food, whether it's a food forest or not. I mean, it's somebody going out there and trying to do something differently.
And somebody creating something is really what it's about. So I have to ask you, so did people think you were nuts? Was there
maybe people always think I'm a little bit nuts. We have a really, I think, forward-thinking staff here at the school. Yeah. And there's a lot of innovative programs, I think, going on here. So, I mean, it's permaculture would be one of many. And as a result, I think it's been pretty well received. When you're the teacher walking up and down the hallways with the shovel and the bucket of soil or the hauling worms from one classroom to another, I mean it definitely is gonna draw some attention. Yeah. And certainly it is. I mean, if you look at this food forest, it's not a conventional garden by any means. It's not your annual vegetables in straight rows with black soil in between. It looks more, if you're into that conventional gardening, you would say it looks more disheveled. It looks sort of like a forest, and I guess that's kind of the point, and that's why we're doing it. It's a large school. I've had a chance to work with a lot of amazing teachers, and there's a lot of amazing teachers out there yet within the school that I'm sure I'll still get a chance to work with. But it is a little bit different, so it attracts some odd glares once in a while. But I think just due to the nature of our amazing staff, they've been really supportive.
And I think mentioning the staff, you just hit on something, because when you said it's a really innovative school, well, the school's kind of an innate object in itself. You made a comment earlier about how you could have approached 100 other principals and they might have said no. So I think what I see is it comes down to people.
Yeah, it really does.
That you're lucky here that you have a collection of forward-thinking people. But the interesting thing is that it doesn't take the whole staff to kind of reach that flash point. You just need a certain number of people. Yeah. And you can end up creating something amazing.
Yeah, I totally agree. And there's I think like a segment of the population that instantly kind of, yes, this is cool, I get it. And there's some that takes a little while to bring them on board, and there's some that are a little bit more skeptical. And maybe the balance is right at this school. I think due to its size, 2,400 students. I mean, certainly from starting a club, permaculture club. Yeah. Because it's still one of those obscure words where what's permaculture again? But if you have 2,400 students and you throw out this crazy idea, there's going to be 30 kids who like it. They're like, wow, that sounds cool. How do I help out? So I mean, that part has been fantastic in terms of finding students and working with them
And then it became, I think, and then over time, and maybe it sounds like you're already starting to get there, but eventually people realise that it's not just the garden that we're talking about here, that it's actually a
There's a lot of other schools that are interested in this kind of these kinds of projects. I would, as kind of time progresses, I've been taking names and numbers down and looking at starting a bit of a network for teachers in Alberta and beyond who are interested in setting up similar programs. Lots of chefs definitely around the province who are going, hey, how do we integrate this?
Because
they're local food, organic food. It's increasing in popularity. So, I mean, having a garden outside of your kitchen is kind of a logical next step.
Yeah, or fish.
Or fish in your kitchen.
In the kitchen. It's quite cool. So and part of building that network. So one thing that we'll do for sure down here somewhere, we'll put the website up.
Great.
And then people can come and check it out, because as you told me earlier that you've kind of been documenting things over.
Yeah, absolutely. So part of our we've had some grantors and some donations in the past. So as a result, we've been careful to kind of write down and take pictures and videos of everything that we've been doing, and document that as sort of almost a bit of a how-to, or in some cases, how not to, as we sort of learn what we're doing. But it's all there. We keep a good record of everything.
Yeah. So how would you encourage somebody that was thinking of doing something something similar?
You know, I really,
Or even if it wasn't, say, food related, but something about permaculture basin being part of a web, and just because there's somebody out there that's going to have an idea, and one of the first things that often happens when people have an idea on what they want to do, they start thinking of the reasons, that voice inside your head, the reasons why you shouldn't do it starts creeping in.
You know, I think like the biggest lesson, and I guess we've touched on this before, is this that understanding that, you know, you're not independent, you're interdependent, and you know, you can start a project, but it's really the people around that project that is going to determine whether it's successful or not. And you don't need to know everything, you know. And I mean, we're in a school. I mean, this is you know, I think this model of education in itself is changing a little bit. And for years, it, you know, has been, you need to know everything. But you know, if we cooperate and we, you know, work with other individuals and we collaborate, you know, we can start filling in those pieces so that, you know, our strengths come together in a way that our weaknesses, you know, don't really matter. So if you're out there and you're starting a new program, think, you know, who are the people that I can get involved? You know, what are the kind of the needs of this program? What does this program have to offer? And just try and start to make those links. So it's about, a lot of it is about having conversations and bringing people on board and finding out what they're passionate about, and, you know, keeping an open mind and kind of exploring. A lot of it is for me in this project has been a lot of play. I mean, we started this aquaponic system, and I think, you know, for all of the reasons that we've discussed, I think it's a cool project. But on sort of just a personal level, I just think it's really cool. And so
I thought it was the coolest thing. It's like, wow, there it is, just in the corner.
Yeah, so it's just like, yeah, I want to do that. And a lot of kids are the same way. You know, but there's a difference between, you know, one guy in a school going, hey, I want to do this cool project. And I'm going to do it all on my own, versus that same guy realizing that, okay, if to make this successful, you know, we need kids on board, we need kids harvesting it, we need, you know, the chemistry class, you know, testing it, we need, let's bring biology down here because they do nutrient cycles and all sorts of things, and that really fits in here. The culinary program's attached to it, you know, so those are two different approaches, and, you know, that realizing, you know, that you know, the project is interdependent, is I think the way to go.
And that the resources are out there, in this case, within the school. But the resources are out there within a community. So we need to start, first off, that's one of the most important things. It's like, you get going.
That is, you know, I mean, that's a great point, is there are so many great ideas that never get off the ground, because it's like, sometimes I feel like starting is more important than anything. Just taking that first step, and you know, it'll branch out from there. It'll happen. You know, if you have the right intentions behind it. But yeah, don't let starting, you know, the fear of starting ever stop you from doing it.
Yeah, no,
you know?
It's hugely important. The way I've always described it is, you can't know everything before you start. You have to start safe in the knowledge that once you get going and once you get the conversation going, that the pieces will fall into place.
Yeah, and it's surprising that they do, really.
It's amazing.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Well, cool. Well, on that note, we might wrap up. But thanks for taking the time out.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
For having a chat with us.
Excellent. Great to have you here.
Yeah, thank you.